Hi everybody and welcome to today's workshop.
Hello.
We are gonna talk about CD-Burn.DDP.Master, our very own mastering software, and we would like to give you some insights into the workflow, the build-up, the graphical user interface of the software, and how you can deal and master your tracks. So before we start, we are going to talk about the different versions that you can buy and that you can use. Let's switch to our comparison chart. You'll find this one on our plugins website, hofa-plugins.de/en for our English customers. And yeah, as you can see, there's a product comparison with the different versions. We have the Pro version on top. This is the one that we're going to use today. But we also have a standard version, standalone version, a plugin version that you can use in your DAW, and an App Store version with some limitations. And yeah, when you consider to use our software, you can decide which version is the one to go. As mentioned before, we're going to take a look at the Pro version today. All right, shall we have a little talk about the Plugins Manager? This tool is supposed to install and to activate the plugins that you purchased in general. And at the very starting section, we have the CD and DDP section with the different products that are part of the DDP series, as well as CD-Burn.DDP.Master in the standard version and our Pro version. And by now, I've activated the Pro version, so that's the one that we're going to use today. But if you would like to test the software before buying, you can actually start the trial period and you can test out both of them. But finally, when you installed the software and you got a license for the software, then the license will decide which version will come up. So it's either DDP-Master or the Pro version or the plugin version in this case. The App Store version works a little bit different because it's a tool that you download via the App Store.
Yeah, maybe where we can say something. The two versions, Master and Master Pro, are technically the same. So they will decide, depending on the license or on the demo type you start, which version you run. So don't be confused if you install the demo of the standard version. You can also test the Pro version without another different installation.
Yeah, absolutely. So feel free to give it a try. So far, so good. Let's take a look at the actual software. So when you start the software, when you run the software, we can see there's a lot going on actually, but we can say there's an upper editor and a lower editor. The upper editor is supposed to give you info about the metadata that you can enter, but also the track list, while the lower editor is supposed to show the waveforms, and we're going to talk about this just in a minute. Shall we? Would you like to? Yeah,
maybe
sure.
we open a project here.
That sounds good.
Which one is it? This one?
This one, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Okay, so there it is. So we had the plain user interface, and now we open the project that we created. It's based on a DDP image. It's actually a real DDP image that went to the pressing plant, and we can see in the upper section that there are the different tracks. We have pregaps, more on that later on. And yeah, some information about the composer and the track artist, the album artist, just the typical features that we all know from CDs or from streaming platforms. Some information about the tracks, basically.
Yeah. As you say, tracks, we should mention there are two different meanings for tracks in this case. So on the one hand, we have the CD tracks, so which is a different songs which you will have on your CD later. But also you have can have several audio tracks if you want to mix or do crossfading or stuff like that. So don't mix up these
The terms. for it.
So normally we speak about CD tracks if we talk about what is the time order of different songs, and we talk about audio tracks if we talk about the mixing
The actual audio information. Yeah.
stuff down there.
Absolutely. So the tracks are more supposed like the actual audio clips that finally come up as a track. For example, the very last one here, which is the longest track on the record here. It's the last track, the last actual song, but we could have different tracks within the software, for example, if I do something like that. So there we have a second track for different kind of editings or whatever comes to mind. So yeah, that's basically it for this. And yeah, to give you a little bit of an overview, the points already mentioned, for example, the pregaps or something like default pause, the different modes, the snapping. We're going to talk about this during the workshop. And yeah, shall we start with our actual
I think as a starting point, we should introduce some technical background stuff.
Sounds good.
What it's all about here. So the CD or the audio CD, which we are talking about here, has some technical definitions that are defined in the so-called Red Book standard, which you may have heard of.
Goes back to the 80s, actually. It goes back to the 80s.
Yeah,
I think
it's
1982
a standard
or
from the
something like
80s. So, and it is predefined that an audio CD is always defined as having 44.1 kilohertz sample rate and a bit depth of 16-bit. So if you hear these numbers nowadays, you might think, oh, that's not the best thing you can have. But in the 80s, it was the very best thing that you could have. As far as I know, when Sony and Philips defined this standard, there were some discussion because one side just wanted to say, oh, 12 bits should be enough. But then they took the 16. I think that was a good decision.
Sure.
So that we still have a standard now, which is still working nowadays and has a quality that you can still use nowadays.
There are still CDs and still some artists
CDs
and bands that like to.
I think that will be there in some years from now. So. What is so special about this software? You see it in the name CD-Burn.DDP.Master. So maybe we should talk about what is a DDP.
Sounds great.
This is an image standard. It's called Disk Description Protocol. And why do we need this? You may have heard of ISO images or stuff like that. And often there's a misunderstanding that people say, hey, why can't I do an ISO image of my CD? Well, the problem is an ISO image is always defined for having a file system like you have on your hard drive. And you can make CD-ROMs, which you can put also on an ISO image. But audio CDs have a completely different definition. So audio CDs do not have any file system as you know them from your computer, maybe. So an audio CD is really only one long stream of audio in 44.1 kilohertz and 16-bit. And beside that, there's some additional so-called sub-channel information. So if you put your CD in your CD player and press start, the CD player will play all that audio stream without thinking about where one song starts or ends, because it's only one very long stream. And because of this difference to the file system based data, we need a special type of image which you can send to your pressing plant if you want to produce your CDs. So this image format is a bit special because that is not only one image file, but it consists of a whole folder of several files.
Yeah. For example, if we can switch to our screencast here, I have a folder with the title of the actual album. And as mentioned before, a DDP image is not only consisting, it's not only a special file format, but it's a folder that consists of different files. So actually we have 7 files. For example, the image .dat. This is usually the largest file. You sure you can display
show
it?
The size here.
Yeah, I think so. It's
That
in
might be
German, but I
interesting.
guess you can get yeah, an impression how it looks like.
So what we should mention, normally the standard defines some of these files. Some may have different names. And what is important is that these DDP ID, DDP MS, an image.dat, or that can be named different, where the audio data is stored, and the PQ description. You may have already heard of the name PQ sheet. I just talked about the sub-channel data, which is stored beside the audio stream on the CD, and the marker positions of your track start and track end is stored in a sub-channel which is just called sub-channel P and Q, and that is why this name PQ sheet is always used. And in this sheet, you will have the listing of the tracks and the additional CD text data. We will get to that later on.
As well as pregaps, for example, if there are pregaps or the pre-counting time, it's all listed there.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing we should mention, for example, the CD text is optional, so you can have CDs without CD text, then this file will just not be there. And what's also interesting, you can put any other files into this folder that would not destroy the image. You can have your album description or some pictures or whatever you want, put it in that folder just for having it together. But the pressing plant will ignore all these additional files because it is clear which ones belong to the DDP image.
Yeah, so it's always good to keep the files together. For example, if you create a DDP image or if you receive a DDP image, please make sure that the folder structure stays the same so that you are not using different files in different folders. It really has to be there. It has to be one folder with 7 or less files, but they have to be there. And for this purpose, it's good to use a zip option, for example. CD-Burn actually has a zip option. If we create a DDP image later on, maybe you can check the zip option so you make sure that your customer has everything put all together.
Okay.
Absolutely. Shall we talk a little bit about the CD length?
Yeah, that's a good point. As we can see here, we have a timeline which goes up to nearly 80 minutes. And that is not random. That is really the maximum length that we can put on our CD here. There's a rumor that the CD was defined as one manager of Sony wanted to have Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, to have it on one medium without having to turn a record.
Sides.
But in fact, the CDs, the Redbook CD standard does not say anything about how long a CD in minutes and seconds should be. So the definition only talks about the size of the disc and the distance of the tracks which are on the disc and some tolerances of these distances. And that's why the first CDs were always a maximum at 74 minutes. And if you buy blank CDs nowadays, normally it's printed 80 minutes on it. So this is just because the tolerance in production could be reduced in the meantime, and that's why
There's more space available.
There's more
in the
space
end.
available on these disks. There is also the possibility to have even more than 80 minutes. We also have the option in our software where you can go to the project settings, where you can project.
Where is it? There is it.
There it is. There you can also say maximum CD time and set it to 99 minutes, which is definitely not recommended here. It is possible technically, but you will have the problem that these CDs will not run on every CD player. So most CD players can play these, but there you will find also some which don't play them. And the problem is that they not only will refuse to play the last 9 minutes or so, but they don't play the disc at all. And that is because the tracks are smaller, the track distances are smaller, and if the laser of the pickup cannot be adjusted that exactly, then the CD won't work in that player. So I don't really recommend to use these 90 or 99 minute media. Only if you have some CDs that you make for yourself and you know your player will play them, then you can do that. But I won't use that for mass production.
And not for a standard, yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Okay, so if your project is longer than 80 minutes, you should think about multiple CDs, so a double CD album for your music, or if you have
audiobooks, for example.
then you sometimes have 6 or even 10 CDs in one box.
Yeah.
And if you want to do that kind of project in CD-Burn, you just can have multiple CD projects. So what I can do here, just to show it, we can say, let's start a new CD somewhere. Then it is split up into several CDs, and now you see the timeline is longer, and you can add as many CDs as you want so to have a longer project, which then will be automatically divided into several CDs, and you also can change the position where you want to have the change from one CD to the next. I'll go back here for the moment because we don't need it for this project.
Yeah, but it's possible if you do audiobooks, or for example, if you have a concept album, a double album. I think it's even used nowadays by different artists and bands. So you can do it this way to have only one project, but 2 or more CDs, if you would like to do it this way.
And if you're going to export the DDP images, you will automatically have a bunch of DDPs for each disk.
Yeah.
So you can send that to your pressing plant.
And they will automatically know, okay, it's different DDP images for each CD, of course, what makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Shall we talk a little bit about vinyl?
Yeah, so this is still something.
I think vinyl got something like a second springtime.
Yeah, it's a revival, I think. Yeah.
5 to 10 years ago. So actually, we here at HOFA Media, we got asked if we do vinyl productions for the pressing plants and whatever. So there's a special vinyl mode. I'll turn it on in the upper right corner, and we talked about the different tracks and the usual interface of the CD standard according to the Redbook standard, but now we're going to talk about vinyl, so we have to think in sides. So for example, this project is about almost 60 minutes long, the CD, so I think it's 20 to 22 minutes, something like that, when it comes to a vinyl side. So we have automatically transferred our project into three sides, side A, side B, side C. So it would be
so we
three
make
vinyl
a
discs.
triangular record? No. Well, in this case, you may have one empty side. That can make sense if you want, but you can also just adjust it here. You can start additional sides with this context menu, and then we can say, okay, we want to spread it a little bit equally spaced. So then we can move the markers here and decide which track is on which side. In this case, we have one piece which is different. It's movements. So
Yeah.
we would not
Split it up.
here. So in that case, I would put this one on the first side, and maybe here we can go one step further so that we have a equally spaced
Yeah.
size of the
That
sides.
makes sense. And for the purpose of exporting the files, we are not talking about DDP images when we do an export here. It's actually a site containing audio information for the pressing plant when they go for the mastering, for the final steps. So I think we got an example here. If I go back, there is a vinyl export folder. So we have, for example, our very first example with the 3 sides, and you can also see it in the vinyl track list compared to the CD. So we're talking in sides. So we have side A, of course, side B, and in our example, side C, the very last track.
Yeah. So one maybe we can show this here. If you have still have the CD in this project. So the idea is that you can have multiple exports to different release formats from the same project. So we can do our DDP or directly burn a CD in your computer directly, and then we have this export functions where we can choose different formats for exporting. So we can here save the tracks as separate files, for example, for digital releases. And we can also save our vinyl sides, that's what we've just seen. So then we have one audio file per side, and the pressing plant can take this audio file and have to list where to see where the next song begins, so that they have that information.
Something like a guide to know, okay, there's side A and side B starts, and it shall be done like that.
Yeah, but I think before we go to the further exports, we should maybe show how to start with the import.
I think that makes actually sense. So shall we talk about the import, maybe from scratch, because we have to talk about sample rate because it's really important. Shall we start with a new project, for example?
Maybe I just open a new project.
There's a plus icon. It's quite easy. You can also go to the file menu and start a new project. There are different options
and
usually.
And you have tabs, so you can have multiple projects open.
Exactly.
So if we have a look here, we have some audio files here. So as you can see, we have here some files with different sample rates, and on the upper right corner you see which sample rate our project currently uses. So if I try to import a 48 kilohertz file, I will get this message. So the file sample rate does not match to the project sample rate. So I have two choices. I can just set my project sample rate to that rate, or I can do a conversion to a different format. So maybe in this case, I just set project rate, then I can put it to 48 kilohertz here, and then the conversions to the other formats I need 44.1 for CD, for example, will be done after all my editing is finished.
That makes sense. So you can save the project in 48. Just a little hint, please make sure that your audio driver and your interface also runs at 48 then. So there won't be any constant glitches and upscaling and upsampling and things like that. So it's always good to have everything at the same sample rate. So your audio driver and the software go hand in hand.
Right. So maybe I show that here. We have our audio playback settings. Here we can choose which which audio device we are using, which channels we want to have the playback on. And we choose a playback sample rate here, which can be different from the project rate, but then you will always hear a sample rate conversion during playback,
Yeah.
which will not be on your final exports, but
It's
so
hard
it's
to-
recommended that you can hear what you want to export and select the appropriate rate here.
Exactly. So when creating a DDP image, there has to be a final conversion in the end to 44.1 and 16, because as we already talked about it, there's the Redbook standard, which is for the CD. So yeah, you can either convert it right at the beginning to 44, or you work in 48 or even higher sample rates, depending on your files. But in the very end, in the last step, there has to be a conversion into the Redbook standard 44. So it's really up to you how you decide. For example, you have high resolution files in 96 and you would like to do some real mastering in CD-Burn by using plugins, third-party plugins whatsoever, render cache, we're going to talk about this at the end of this workshop, then it might make sense to have the project sample rate set to 96. And in the final step, for example, if you plan to have a vinyl export, you go with, let's say, 88. Then we have the streaming release, which I think can be in 96, for example, for Tidal or different platforms. But for the CD, it has to be 44, so there has to be a final conversion. But something like that, just as a side note. Okay, shall we import them all together?
Yeah, maybe you can show here. We can just, by drag and drop, put our files here. In the Pro version, we have an additional window where we can do a pre-sorting. So if we want to have a different order and not the alphabetical one, we can also already adjust this here a little bit. And now we're going to import this. And now we are asked for conversion, because now the first one was at 44, so the project sample rate will stay on that, but the other ones have to be converted, and we see here these are automatically converted in the background, and we already can start playing the rest. One thing we should mention here is we have a volume slider in the software at this side, which is only for playback. So everything you do here will not influence your project and will not be a loudness difference on your export.
It's just
so
what you hear within the project. It's not the actual audio that gets exported or converted or whatever.
Right. So that's just for hearing, and that's something you should know.
Okay, shall we talk about the basic workflow?
Yeah, maybe we
I think
can
it's about time.
go on there.
Sure. Okay.
One thing that maybe I do this step again, because what we see now is already something that is not the default setting.
Yeah.
So maybe I put something to default values back. We'll get to that later. So if I put in these files right now.
So we imagine we're doing mastering. We plan to.
I can sort this, and then I say, okay. Now they already had been converted from my first try. What we see here now is that the files are put into our timeline, and there is a track list of CD tracks created with appropriate markers at the start and at the beginning of the track. So maybe we should talk about what is the difference of start and pregaps. Maybe we go to the start or second track and
zoom
in here.
Yeah, you can also do this by using G and H on your keyboard, for example. So it's, I think Cubase uses these shortcuts as well in standard, but you can adjust it if you like to. But you can use the zoom options that you have vertically and horizontally.
Right. So what we see here is we have the clips of the audio files. We have a gap between them, which is a pause of silence. And
It's real silence.
Real silence, and then you have these markers at the end of that clip and at the start of the next clip. So this distance between these clips is what we have defined here as the default pause. This is exactly 2 seconds. Then we have these markers, which you can see are a little bit put into that gap and not exactly on these edges. And that's why you can see here that the duration of this pre-gap is not exactly 2 seconds, but a little bit less than that. So why do we do that? This has some technical reasons. If you play a CD in your CD player, there are cases, especially if you have quite old CD players, but also on new computers. I just found out that I had the same problem on Windows 11 when I played a CD in my CD-ROM drive. Sometimes the device does not really react fast enough to start your audio output. So in that case, if you put your marker just directly on the moment where your audio starts, well, in this case, there's some silence in the file, that would not matter. But if that's not the case and your audio really starts with the first sample of your audio, then you might lose the beginning of your track if you start playing track 4 or track 2 or whatever.
Yeah, then we have a glitch.
And then we have a missing part of the song. And that's why it's common to just leave some distance here between the marker where the CD player says, okay, there my track will start in that permanent stream, and not directly on this edge of the clip. And that's what's defined in these global settings under marker distances. So we have distance before and after the track. We have some special cases for first and last track because it's common to make them a bit longer there. And we also have the default pause here, which is a 2 seconds standard. There's quite common rumor that it is a definition of the Redbook standard that you have to have 2 seconds pause between your tracks. That's absolute nonsense. You can do what you want. As I mentioned it before, we have the audio stream which goes from the beginning of the CD to the end of the CD, and you have your subchannel data where are the markers. So it doesn't absolutely not matter what you do in your audio stream. So even the area between your track end and track start markers does not have to be silenced. It is common to do it like that. But it doesn't, you can do what you want at that point.
Absolutely.
So, and always, I think musically, those 2 seconds are often just too short for a pause. So you really should listen to your music if you order your tracks and say, okay, let's listen to the transition from that track to that track, and decide how long do I feel good with that pause, and do not say, oh, it has to be 2 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever. These numbers are absolutely unimportant.
Yeah. And there's also one important thing about the seconds, because CD-Burn works in frames, because the CD standard is based on frames. But you can move the audio information in samples, which is, I think, the lowest unit in the audio world, if you will. But it's always good to have a little bit of a slight offset, for example, with the marker distances, because it has to be done in frames, and that's why we would recommend to keep them as a standard. But as he already mentioned, we could also set them to 0, if you will. So we would get rid of any marker distances, which makes sense, for example, if you have a live concert without any pregaps, without any distances, and so on.
And maybe
So
we
that-
go
that
back
might
to your
sense.
first project here.
Yeah,
There
that's
we
a good
have-
example.
There we have this piece which is consisting of several movements. And so we do not want to have a gap between them. It's just, maybe we can listen to this transition here.
Sure.
So we have the end of that part. So this is a
Yeah,
very quick
absolutely.
transition, but if you want to put that CD in your CD player, you want to be able to start track
Yeah.
4 track 4 immediately if you want.
For example, we had the pedal on the grand piano, but there's still some reverb going on in the room because it was done with room mics as well. So until the reverb really fades out, there should not be a real gap or a glitch. So that's why I decided to actually leave out any pre-gap, any marker distance, and just keep it going with the fourth track, starting right after the third track.
Right. So as you can see here, there's different versions, and some tracks do have pre-gaps, some don't, for the reasons we just mentioned. So
Shall we talk about pre-gaps?
yeah, maybe we should do that. Maybe first before that we should clarify what is these frames.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
So a frame is a set of samples. It's a very short time, and for the audio CD, it is defined as the 75th part of a second. So, or you could also say it's 588 samples. It's a very short time, but this is a minimum where a CD marker can be put. And the reason for that is that an audio CD has some kind of error correction. So if you have scratches on your CD, for example, then the data which is read from the CD using the laser is read in blocks of 588 samples. And inside these blocks, there's additional checksum data, which you can use to find out if this block was correct. And if the block wasn't correct, the CD player will read it again. And if it fails again, it in some cases it can even mathematically correct the error that was there because of the scratch, and that it was why the CD was so revolutionary when it came out, because people knew the vinyl record. A scratch always meant you have some noise on your record, or even that it jumps back to the other track. And with a CD, you can correct parts of these errors, but this only works if you do not read single samples, but blocks of samples. And the sidechain data, which I mentioned before, this is stored by each frame. So each frame can store one marker maximum. So the markers can only be placed on this
Frame line.
and not on the sample line. So maybe we can
Shall we show it?
show it here if I zoom in a little bit more.
Yep.
We can see here I can move this as I want. Sorry. I can move this. I have to move it like this. I can move the clip as I want. So this is sample precise, but I cannot move this marker under these frame positions. So this is because of the CD standard, and that's why you can have a little distance between that, but this is normal for any CD. And some customers complained that other software would allow placing these markers in between, but this is not really true. They may show it like that, but in the end,
There have
if
to be roundings.
when they do the CD, they have to round this. And here you see directly what you're doing and not have a surprise in the end that the marker isn't there where you wanted to have it.
Yeah, so it's a frame-based workflow that you have to deal with when doing it for CD, and that's why you can move the markers only in frames, but you can move the audio files based on samples, so that works in that case.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we? We just saw a little bit about the snapping and the sliding. Shall we do a little bit like
maybe
some showing off?
Maybe we do just some editing here to show what is possible. And
I think that makes
one
sense.
thing we should mention is this default pause is a value for defaults for your further editing steps. So if you change this value, which is also given in frames, by the way, you have no changes in your project. So nothing will change here if you change your default pause. So this is only for further editing steps. If you will add another track right now, then you will have the new default pause used.
If you
but
plan
for
to
now,
import.
the project will remain as it is. Also for when you change these marker distances, will do nothing in your project. It's just a setting for everything you do after that.
So it's always good to think about your actual project settings when you try to set up a final mastering.
Right. So if you have a live CD and you know this will be a continuous
audio stream,
you should not import it with automatic gaps here. So you should set that to 0 before.
Absolutely.
But if you have a combination of both, you can decide if you put it on a default pause and then adjust the rest, or if you leave it to 0 and then add your pauses as you like them. So, for example, here, if we want to say, okay, this pause was created, but I do not want it there, you can just move it like that. And when you put on the snapping function, you also have a snapping that you will have exactly
on the frames,
on the samples, on the samples where the clips will start and end. And when doing this, the marker will always be placed to the next frame border that is possible here.
Oh, okay.
Or to the next border, which is has the distance it had before. So in that case, I had some distance already, and this distance is always kept if you move your file. One thing which is very different to any DAW, which you may use normally, is that you do not have single clips movements, but if you move your clips here, you will always move the rest of the project because you are not editing only this clip, because it won't make sense if I make this pause shorter to make this pause longer. That makes no sense. And because of that, everything which is coming after that will be moved as well.
That's why it's marked and highlighted in orange. When you click on it without doing anything, everything from that starting point will be selected. But you can also use the Alt key, for example, if you would like to mark and highlight a single file.
Yeah. But there's also another mode. So what we are just shown is
the slide mode. So you
mode.
can move the tracks to the right or to the left, including the markers. Without the markers, it's really up to you.
Right. And beside that, we have the so-called insert mode. This is made for the case that you have your project here and then think, oh, I really think this song should not be at position 4 but at position 3. And in that case, you can just change the position here. And that's why it's called insert mode. You just take one clip and all the track markers around this clip and put it at a different position. And you can also see here also the track title, which is currently only taken from the file name, but you can put a real title here if you like. Then it's also taken with it to the new position. So this is a combination of the the audio of the CD tracks and the audio clips, which are here in edited together.
Can I exchange a track which is not already part of the project and part of the game? Is there an option?
Well, if you say there's two possibilities. Either you say, "Oh, this song I don't like it anymore. I want to have
or there's a different version.
total different song or different version."
Yeah.
Then what I can do is I take another audio file and
Using
just
drag and drop.
drop it on it here.
Yeah.
In this case,
a
I
total
get a
different
warning.
track.
It's a total different
Yeah.
track, so it doesn't have the same size as the original file. But I can say, okay, I want to use that anyway.
Yeah. So it gets adjusted, the waveform and the positions with the markers and everything.
And right, what you could see here is that the rest is also moved so that a new track will fit in there.
Okay.
And if you just have another mix down, which has exactly the same length, you can also just exchange it like that, or you can also have it in the context menu
So
to say
that's the first option, and you
replace
can
audio
do it.
file.
Replace the audio file by right-clicking on the actual clip, and then you can do it. It's basically the same.
Right.
Cool. Yeah. Shall we talk a little bit more about the editing side? For example, can you cut the waveforms? Can we use fades? Can we have crossfades? Are there any options to get the job done if we would really like to adjust and to edit the audio material? If there are things like, okay, there's that the file length is actually way too long, maybe we can cut the very beginning or the end or something like that.
What we see here, for example, this audio file had some silence at the beginning. So if we do not want to have that extra silence, we can have just adjust the beginning of the clip and then again move it
in the correct mode, of course.
In the
slide mode. Yeah,
just move it back there, and then I have removed that.
Okay, cool.
And if I want to say, oh, there should be some
there might be a little glitch. Yeah.
I can just move this square here.
Yeah.
A little bit. I can right click on that to have different fading curves. And I can, with this line, I can adjust the
clip volume.
These are the very simple editing steps. We can do even more with plugins, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, sure.
And we can also put the clips overlapping. And in that case, we will get automatically a crossfade in that overlapping area.
Yeah.
And if you want to say, I want to let this track start here, but I want to have a faster fade out for the first track, I also can do this.
Yeah.
Put it into a different audio track, and then I have the possibility to do my fading freely, and only if they are overlapping on one track, they will do the crossfade exactly in that overlapping area.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah, we talked a little bit about the editing side that you can do. We didn't talk about the options to include metadata in the upper editor yet, I think. For example.
Right. We should talk
so
about
maybe
that
we
too.
can have a check on the upper section. So shall we use the other project for this purpose?
Maybe we can use this here because there's some more data inside already.
Absolutely. So once again, as mentioned in the beginning, you can see the track artist, the album artists, you can have the composer and stuff like that. But there are actually more things than meet the eye. So for example, the ISRC codes or the EAN codes that are usually part of the game when you do an album. So shall we show some hints regarding these
we have
codes?
this table with several columns here right now. But we can adjust which columns we want to use there. So let's go to the metadata settings.
And there they are.
And we see a long list of possible entries that we can use here. And what we can also see is that there's different formats which support different kinds of metadata. So the first one is CD text, which can be put on an audio CD and which can also be part of your DDP image,
Yeah,
as mentioned
depends
before.
actually on the player, if your CD player is able to display CD text as well as your software player, for example, the Windows Media Player or iTunes or whatsoever, because some of these players ignore CD text and try to grab the information from the World Wide Web. So if you have worked on your CD and you're right before your final release and you burn a CD and everything is there, the metadata and so on, and you wonder why there's no CD text, that's because your player, software player or even hardware player in your car, for example, simply ignores what's on the CD and tries to grab the information from the World Wide Web. So if you have a commercial CD by Madonna or Toto, Pink Floyd or whatever, usually the players are able to collect the information from the World Wide Web because it's a commercial release. So there are some entries in any entry things.
Right. So
Yeah.
if you put your CDs into iTunes or whatever, there are some extra tools that you can install to read the CD text
If there's
to your
something there.
software.
Yeah.
And you can also upload your text from iTunes, for example, to that kind of databases. So then they will be available for others too.
Yeah.
But the standard, in fact, for iTunes is that it does not read the CD text, and that's always a point of confusion for for people. So
Okay, let's go back to the
let's
actual
go back
list.
to the actual list. So what we see here, there are some parts possible for CD text, which are predefined, and as the standard is already from the 80s, it will not grow anymore. So no one will be able to extend the CD text standard nowadays. But there's other formats. So if you export your files as WAV or MP3 files, you have those ID3 tags, and there's other columns defined which you can use and fill here. So we can fill all these columns, and if you write a DDP image, you will only have the ones that are supported by CD text. And if you write an MP3 file using ID3 tags, you will only have the ones which are defined in for ID3. So, for example, the songwriter is not defined for ID3, so you cannot use it there. Riff info is also for WAV files, an additional format. And the Vorbis commit is used in
Ogg Vorbis.
Ogg Vorbis and also in FLAC format.
Okay.
So these all have different definitions, and here you can see what you can use on which format.
Okay. Shall we check the marks for the ISRC and the other one?
Yeah, maybe we can do that.
Yeah,
And if
sounds
we
good.
check it here, we will get
It's
the additional
empty
columns.
because there aren't any of these codes, but I would say we try to import some of them. So here we are. For example, this one. This is an ISRC code, very basic. Okay, let's do
Not
it.
a real one.
A real one. Maybe I go back to CD mode. So there it is. Okay, the first one. And there's a very cool option, because usually when you have ISRC codes for track listings for your albums, they in one line in a row, and then you can use this little arrow here, so it's filled out automatically. So it's the one with the first number with the 1, and the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and so on. So that's really cool if these codes match in the correct order. Okay, so let's do the same for the EAN code. Here it is. This code is usually the same for the whole record.
Right, so that is what you know from any products where you see these
the label code.
Labels with the black and white lines.
Yep.
And what's important for both of these numbers, you cannot just put any number you like there. You have to ask your distributor which will put the CD on the market, which codes you can use there because they have to be registered somewhere. So the UPC or EIN code is used in the shop when you buy the CD and go paying for it. You will have the scanner which will read that code and know what you have to pay. The other thing, the ISRC code is mainly used for example, if your songs are played on a radio station and you have, in Germany, it's a GEMA or other organizations who do the payment for the artists. These are registered by the ISRC codes.
Yeah, it's like an ID for each track. So each track or each song has a particular
it's each
ID.
recording to be precise. So if you have a remix of your song, it will get a different ISRC codes. But if you put the same song on different CDs, for example, you have a best of and put all songs together, you will have to use the same ISRC codes than you had used for the same song before. Because it's the same recording, so that's important.
Okay, it depends on the recording and the purpose.
Right.
Okay, sure. All right. Shall we do a little bit more regarding the export? For example, the export settings that we can have with some space before the actual track and some space after the actual track. So I think that's something.
Maybe we again should come back to that. That's not left-handed mouse. That's why I'm confused. Maybe we go back to this example again. We have seen these markers here, and as we mentioned, this should have a little different distance to the beginning of the audio. But what is this marker here? This is the so-called track end or pregap marker. So we can see that entry pregap here. And this is optional. So you can just push the trash can and remove it, and it will not do any difference when you listen to that CD. Because these markers are only used for the CD players what they show in their time display. So what we can see here, if we run it, we will see the track time, and now in this gap we will have track 4 already because it's a pre-gap to track 4. But the time is running from the 2 seconds down to 0 in that area. And now after this marker we will start again with the track 4 at time 0, and now it will count up again. And this pre-gap marker really is only important for that kind of display. And on the other hand, important if you want to export your tracks and have to decide, does this gap belong to the track before or to the next track? It's called pre-gap, so from the name it is belonging to the next track, but if it's only silence, it makes no sense to have 2 seconds of silence or whatever in front of your track, because you want to have hear your song and not the silence before it.
And you can use this information when it comes to exporting the files. So I think that's what you were about
Maybe
to show.
we go to this export
menu
options. We can, for example, go to this, which will go to the track export settings. You can select here if you want to see this option window, which every export you're doing, or if you just want to see it one time and always leave it like it is. But it is really a good idea to always have a look at it if it's really on the settings you just want to have. So first of all, you select your file format, which is by default a WAV file, which is uncompressed, so has all quality possible you can have. Same is for AIFF, which is the same as WAV, but just defined by Apple. A little bit different, but the audio data is the same. FLAC files. FLAC is a compressed format, but it's it is without any loss. So the audio signal can be reconstructed exactly, not like MP3, which is removing some kind of audio to have the reduction, and FLAC cannot reduce the file size as good as MP3 can, but it will not lose any audio. So it's really the same audio quality that you had before. Ogg Vorbis, many may know it. It's also from the idea. It's working a bit similar than MP3, but it's not
an almost better codec.
Almost
I think.
better, but it's not so widespread. So most people
goes back to the
prefer
90s.
MP3 here.
But that's fine.
For some of the file formats, for example MP3, you can also select the quality which you want to have. So which is the compression rate in that case. For WAV, it's uncompressed, so you cannot select anything here. Then you should select which sample rate you want to export. If your project is 44.1, it makes sense to have that to keep that here.
Upscaling might not really make sense.
Does not make sense to go up to a higher sample rate here because it will not increase your quality. But if you had 96 kilohertz, for example, at the beginning, it makes more sense to create your project at 96 kilohertz.
And maybe keeping it for streaming releases. Or,
right. Keeping it for streaming releases, then you can put the original rate, and for your CD you do the downsampling to 44.1. And also the bit depth depends on what you need here. If you are going to have it uploaded to some streaming platform, you should use the highest possible. But in some cases, if you have it on your own online storage and don't have too much space, you may be selecting the 16-bit or whatever to just save some space. And for the next options, this is important where these pregaps are defined. So here you can really select if your pregap should be included in your next audio track or in the track before or in both. Then you will put this part to both files, or if you switch off both, this will be completely removed from.
It really depends on the file length in the end. If you would like to include the
silence, it depends on what's in there. So if you have a live recording and it's the applause, it belongs to the part before. But if it's for example a gap where the singer will introduce the next song, you may want to put it to the next track because it's belonging to that track. So that's always an individual decision. Then you can select if you want to write all the metadata that you have entered here to the different file formats, and this is also depending on what you have selected, if which formats are possible here. And what you can also see here is include cover pictures. So we had, in this example, we had a nice little picture in here of a young man at the piano. And this picture is not part of your audio CD because the audio CD does not have data space for that. But you can use this picture to have it included in your MP3 files, for example, in the ID tags. So if you play that song in your player, then the player software can directly show that picture.
Which makes sense for Spotify, for example.
And if you want to, as you have seen before, also on our PDFs that are exported, this picture is also used. But that's the only use for this picture. So this picture is not part of your DDP image. That's important to know. Right, we've been here at this. Now we have to, or we can.
We have options to name
Right,
the
right.
exported file
So
or files.
this is a feature of the Pro version. The standard version is a bit simpler here. There you can just select some options, but in the Pro version you can really make your own automatic naming from the metadata information that you have. So, for example, right now we just have track and the project track number. So the preview says the first file will be called track 1.
Yeah, sure.
Possible,
Simple.
but not really that that nice. So what you may be doing, you want to have numbering at the beginning because you want to have it alphabetically sorted in
keep
your
it in an
in
order.
your file system, for
Yeah.
example. So let's remove that name track, and then we can just by drag and drop put a separator here. You can edit what the separator should be. So if you do not want the minus, you want to have an underscore, you can have an underscore or whatever. You can put any text here what you want. So I'll keep the minus in this case one space too long. So, and now for example we say okay, that's we take the album title first, or maybe the artist first. Do a separator in between that. Another separator here, and then we put the track name, track title here, and then we get automatically file names generated. And if you export all the files here, they will get all individual names from that scheme.
So that's
and you can also
custom
include some technical details. So if you are going to export it in different formats, you can have it in 16, and now I can add word bit, for example. Then this also will be in the name. And if I change the bit depth here, then it should be changed to what I have here. You can also include the separate. So this is also possible to, if you export it in WAV and in MP3 and with different formats, you can include the format in the name as well. So if you want to put them all in one folder, you won't have any conflict there.
Yeah, and it's a good order finally, depending on what you are going to do with the files. If you send them to somebody and the person will see, okay, it's in 44 and 16, or maybe 48 and 24 and so on.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Right. So the next export is the most important one for the software, I would say.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
writing the DDP image. And one thing we would like to show here is that we have an option here, because we also have the HOFA DDP Player Maker installed here.
Yeah.
And in that case, you can directly open the created image in that software, and maybe we just show what this will be doing.
Yeah.
As we mentioned before, the DDP image is a very special kind of image format, and most people do not have a player for that on their computer. So they get that folder with some files and say, what should I do with that?
Yeah.
And the studio guy says, well, listen to it and tell me if I should send it to the pressing plant.
And you have no idea what to do.
The musician does not have any idea what to do with it.
Yeah.
And to make it easier for them, well, they can search the internet and buy a DDP player somewhere and listen to it with that. But if I want to make it my musician customer easier, then I can send him a player which is created for this image. So and that was the HOFA DDP Player Maker can do.
So the idea is to create a DDP player, a custom player that the person who has no idea what to do with the actual DDP image before it goes to the pressing plant, that this person has a chance to check the audio files, if it's the correct order, if the metadata is correct and everything. You can even allow him to burn a CD out of the player. You can do a secure image so that he's not able to forward the DDP image unless you got paid. And yeah, that's what it's all about. So we have a direct connection between our CD-Burn software and the player maker to make it easier for the final customer.
Right. So maybe we just have a look at this window. It's looking like a very simple playing software. You just have the same track list as you had in
listed with the pregaps and maybe no pregaps and everything. That has to do with
you
it.
can see all this. You can just play it here.
First track.
And then, well, this is the player maker itself. And if I do the making the player, so I can also add some stuff. I can do put my own studio splash screen here. I can put a link to my website, for example, and I can select if the player that the customer will get is allowed, for example, to burn CDs, or if it can export files, or if I said he should only listen to it and I don't want him to allow him that. What Simon mentioned, the secure image, there I can also decide in which mode the image is encrypted. So this is for a case where I don't trust my customer, is that he will not take the image, go to the pressing plant, and the mastering studio will never hear again from him. So in that case, I can send him an encrypted
Secure
image.
player.
And then he can check it. He has the same player, but he cannot send this encrypted image to a pressing plant because they will say, I cannot read it. We cannot make CDs from that. One nice little thing I would like to mention, we also have it in the CD-Burn software as well, is this little button here. It's called Track Transition Playback. As we've seen before, we had talked a lot about how long will I make my pause between tracks, or is there a gap, or should be there no gap, or whatever. And this means there's a point where I can do a lot of errors. So I can do something wrong, or I can do something that my customers did not mean like I did it. And or he will listen to it and says, oh, I really want to have a little longer pause there, or whatever. But it always takes a lot of time to hear the complete album again and again. And this is a little nice feature where I just can say, I want to listen to my track transitions. So I hear the first 10 seconds of the song. And now it jumped to the last 10 seconds of the song. And will play on until the first 10 seconds of the next song.
Okay, cool.
And that makes it just easier and quicker to just check, are these transitions okay and in the way I want to have them.
Sure. Cool feature. Okay, that's it for CD-Burn and the player maker connection. I would say, shall we talk a little bit about real mastering? If that's fine with you?
That's absolutely.
That's cool. Okay, so we talked about the organization, the structure, a little bit of editing, metadata, everything that has to do with it. But of course, there is an option that you can do a real mastering. So as mentioned in the beginning, there are different versions, and we're going to take a look at the Pro version today. So if I open a project that I prepared. So for example, it's only 2 tracks for today, but you can do a real mastering by adjusting the sound, not only setting cuts, adding cuts and using fades and crossfades and moving the audio material, but changing up the sound a little bit. So we have 3 different options for that. You can use plugins. So the standard version of CD-Burn comes with all the HOFA plugins. You simply need to install them. You don't need to have an extra license for them, because if you have a license for the CD-Burn.DDP.Master standard version, you can use all the HOFA plugins for free within CD-Burn.DDP.Master. And if you have access to the Pro version, you can even use third-party plugins by other plugin distributors. And for this purpose, we have clip plugins in the Pro version only, track plugins, and master plugins. So for example, if I highlight the first clip, I can say there is a chain for example, consisting of 4 plugins. So let's listen to the song. This is the mix. And so on. So what I did is I did a little bit of a mastering. I'm using 4 plugins for this chain. Our actually free plugin, the HOFA for You Meter, Fader, and MS Pen. I reduced the stereo image a little bit, just a little bit. So you can see it here from 100% left and right to 94%, because it was quite wide, and I decided to go with a less wide stereo image. And in second place, I added an IQ series EQ by adding some high frequency starting at around 2K by only 2 dB, because if you have to use a lot of steps in mastering, maybe you should go back to the mixing, so it's only slight things that you would do. Then I decided to come up with a little bit of a bus compressor done by the HOFA IQ series comp. So yeah, something about a standard value 2 to 2.5 ratio, a little bit of compression, a little bit of gain reduction. And finally, our IQ series limiter version 2, where you have different modes. It's a simple limiter. And now we take a listen to what's going on.
It's so hard to believe that you just can't let go. Can't let go. What have you done now? Is this forever?
Of course, the loudness increases. We have a little bit of compression to bring it all together, and a less wide stereo image. And you can also see it in the meter. We have an LUFS meter, but we can also mark the true peaks display to show true peaks or not. So that's an option. And yeah, I did this with the clip plugins, same here for the second track, but you can also say, okay, I would like to have all my tracks, for example, an album, 10 to 12 tracks, on 10 to 12 songs on different tracks, and then I could use the track plugin. So for each real track has a plugin chain, or maybe if everything is going through the same chain, you can of course do it in the master plugin section as well.
Yeah. You can also, if you import your files, we have an option where you can say, I want to have a new audio track for each file that I import. So if you are going to use track plugins, for example, you only have the standard version and cannot use clip plugin there, then you can put it on.
So it's easier to have a proper order using track plugins.
Right.
Yeah. So there's always a way to get the job done. Okay.
And you also can see here the button chain presets. So what you can do is save this chain as you use it here as a preset, and then you can reload that preset. I don't think that we have saved some here, but
yeah, sure.
You can add a preset
here,
save it under a name you like, and
there it is.
Oh, very good name. And then you can go to another track or clip and load that preset there, and then you have the same plugins on that track.
Absolutely, sure. And also for example, here in the Pro version, you can also say, I would like to have some third-party plugins, like I have the Isotope suite on my laptop. I could use it, but also other distributors, FabFilter, Waves, whatsoever. So yeah, that's an option to do a real mastering. Okay.
Right.
I think in this regard, one of the final steps is the dithering.
Right. One thing we should also mention is you can also have automation on your plugins.
Absolutely. So for example, if you would like to make the chorus section of a song a little bit louder than the verse, we could discuss if this is part of the mixing, but just as an example, if you decide, okay, the chorus could be a little bit louder than the verse, so we could use automation by, for example, using our For You meter fader plugin, and then we can, you know it from your DAW, you can select the different parameters to automate and to draw automation to have a proper line, something
Right.
like that.
Yeah. And this you can do for any
Yeah.
parameter of your plugin. So
Absolutely. It
With-
can also be a threshold or a filter effect or a reverb that changes. Yeah, depends on the actual sense and purpose that you try to aim for.
right.
Cool. Differing next.
Dithering next, yes.
All right.
So, or dithering,
Yeah.
last but not least.
Last but not least. Okay.
There are, if you're having your master ready for distribution, then the last step in every mastering is the dithering, and it should always be the very last step, and you should always avoid to have several times dithering and reconvert it again and have
Yeah.
another dither, because this
It
makes
will add noise.
will add noise more and more, and that makes no sense. So we can have different options for dithering here. In the Pro version, we really have different settings for a 16 or 24-bit export. For 32-bit float, we do not need dithering because there's nothing to be rounded, so we
Yeah.
do not need the dithering. We have an internal dithering where you can also select to switch it off during silence or when it's already truncated to the value. So if there's no rounding, you need no dithering again. But in this, you can also use dither plugins. So we can select, I don't think we have a dithering plugin installed here, but for example, if we would use our IQ limiter at the very last step here, we can also use the dither options of that. And
would
now I
work.
should make it right because I was in the 16-bit section, so I also should select 16-bit here. So that's the two possibilities you have for dithering.
So differing is actually adding a noise floor to cover up any quantizing errors that may occur in
Right,
the
right.
digital
And the
world.
quantizing errors
Yeah.
are occurring if you are reducing your bit depth. So
Yeah.
if you're going down to the 16 bits that a CD requires and your recording was at 32 or 24, then you always have this step, and it's always recommended to use dithering there. So one step, one further feature that we should mention at this point is that you can save some time and work if you want to have several exports of your project.
Yeah.
So if I have this mixing project here right now and I'm using a lot of plugins in it, then I will get to the point that the rendering needs quite some time. And
Yeah,
if I want
sure.
to export it for the audio CD, if I want to burn a CD, put it on the DDP image, have an export for the vinyl release, and I want to have the files for an online platform, and maybe for different platforms which require different formats,
Yeah.
I need to export it sometimes. And if I would do this one by one, I will always render the same thing again.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make too
With
much
different
sense.
conversions, and it
And
takes time.
to do this, we have a little nice feature here, which is called the render cache. So I can select that this will be created always, or with the option that it's only used if there are plugins inside the project, or if there are higher sample rates in this project, which requires a sample rate conversion at the end. So that these steps are only done once, and after that I can export it to the different formats from there, from my final cached mix down.
Yeah.
So in this example, I can just
Yeah. Let's
show it
create a
here.
render cache.
Well,
It's two tracks only.
we
There are
can-
plugins.
We can create it separately, or I can say I want to write the DDP, and now the first step is that a render cache is created because I had selected it in the
The settings menu.
in the settings menu. So it takes a little time because
Sure.
it has to be to render the whole project.
Yeah.
So it's rendering at the project sample rate
Yeah.
that we had selected. So if it would be a 96
Yeah.
kilohertz project, it
But
would
it's actually 32.
It's 32
yeah.
now because if I want to go from there to different formats, maybe I will have another sample rate conversion, and then it doesn't make sense to dither down to 16-bit already. So
Yeah.
I will keep the 13-bit float at this point, and after that, I can export anything I like. So what we've done now, we are already in the player maker mode.
Okay,
But
there it
that's
is.
not what we wanted to show.
Yeah, but
It
here
looks
we
a
have
little-
the render cache.
Now we have the render cache. It looks a little different now. It's now painted blue, just to make clear this is something different than we had
Yeah.
before. We do not have any plugin settings here anymore. We do not have multiple tracks anymore. It's just one final mix down with all the plugins rendered into it. And now we can select here if we need this render cache on different rates, for example.
Yeah,
And we have some information about the cache itself. So it will measure the peaks and true peaks and loudness value from the rendering. And we also can do some normalization afterwards. So maybe we need different normalizations if we want to have it on different streaming platforms who
Yeah.
want to have different loudness values.
Yeah.
Then we can change this here and adjust it again. But we do not need to render the whole project again. And now if you want to export it to a file or DDP, then we only need to have the final, maybe one more sample rate conversion and then the final dithering, which will be done afterwards.
okay. Cool. I've had an eye on the chat, but actually there aren't really that much questions for today, if I see it right. So
And we are also a bit over our time we planned.
sure,
but
that there's actually a lot that we can say. So I would suggest try it yourself. Use the trial mode. Get familiar with the different versions. As you can see, the Pro version has some really cool additional features like the render cache that you can use for different sample rate conversions, even for external sample rate conversions. You can use third-party plugins. You have a little bit more options when it comes to dealing with metadata. And yeah, that's basically it for today. Thanks for joining. Until next time, see you soon.
bye.